All right, this is one of those videos I was actually had no idea I was even gonna make. We're gonna be talking about a new video from Make Art Now that just came out with Yeo and Gerald Undone, where they were talking about raw settings and whether or not you should use them in videos. And it was a great discussion. You should definitely check out that video, but some of the elements they talked about really are relevant to Blackmagic and some of the stuff we talk about on this channel. And saw this as a great encouragement to those just getting started with these cameras, whether you're new to video or you're just coming over to these from DSLR cameras. So let's talk about this video.
When I first got the Blackmagic 4K and we started shooting B-Raw, the first video I did with it was I filmed this $120 million mansion, and the color grading came out so awful. I was so embarrassed, but I was shooting raw, exposing it at like 100 or like 200 or 300 ISO. Like I wasn't allowing enough room for that raw to actually work.
That's funny. I had the exact same. I didn't realize. I don't think I realized that happened to you, because my first fun test shoot with the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, I botched half of the shots.
And yet you shot raw, and you're like, but I shot raw. I should be getting 12 and a half or 13 and a half stops or of dynamic range. Like, I'm not seeing it.
And just like their stories with that, I had a thing where I showed up for a client shoot, and it was bright. We had to film it outside, and was filming it, brought it down to 100 ISO just like them, and got back and couldn't understand why the footage looked so bad, and I just couldn't correct it properly. It is one of those things where going forward from that moment, understanding how the camera works before you get to a shoot. But really what interests me in this video, and is an encouragement to a lot of different people, is the fact that someone like Gerald Undone or Yeo with Make Art Now got the same thing wrong that like all of us did. I just think it's interesting to see two guys who are professional videographers, cinematographers, whatever you want to categorize them as, who've been in the industry for years, use a Blackmagic camera, and the first thing they both did is have the exact same experience by messing up with the ISOs. So to me, that brings up some interesting things for you to think about, especially if you're just getting started with camera gear or you're just getting over the Blackmagic cameras. Number one, when you're first getting started, there's going to be a lot of problems, and you're going to get discouraged, and footage isn't going to come out like how you see everyone else's. So from this example, I wouldn't be too discouraged, because even professionals do get things wrong with cameras initially. So in some ways, you're in the same boat as the rest of us when it comes to new camera gear. And secondly, this really does bring us into an interesting topic of getting to know your camera gear. And I would say the way to really push yourself creatively and to have yourself set up for success when you're filming is to really get into your camera, understand what it does, understand what each setting when you're doing it, what it's doing to the camera, how it's affecting your footage, so you know what it's going to look like in post, and you won't have to come back and then have a bunch of footage that doesn't look great. Like the shots were composed great, everything's great, but when you get back, it just was exposed incorrectly, or something you didn't understand about the camera was done wrong. And that is why I really always push for people to experiment with their cameras. I experiment with my camera all the time in different situations and push it to see what it does, whether it's overexposed or underexposed or any of the different settings. And that really gets back to, and I keep saying this, it really does get back to understanding your camera from the inside out and understanding each little detail. I think there was a thing once where someone had mentioned that you really can't understand a camera until you use it, dedicated time to use it for like 6 months to a year. And when you get 6 months to a year with that camera, then you really start to be able to understand it. But it's a process. And I think that's a lot of the trouble with buying new cameras as soon as they come out, and people kind of get super excited and think it's going to be better than their camera, and then get the camera and then shoot with it, and then it turns out awful because they didn't understand the fundamentals of using the camera. And I've heard stories about people buying Aries, Reds, even Blackmagics like this story, thinking, oh, this is going to be great. This footage is going to look great. The camera's going to do all the work for me. And the footage turns out terrible, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which camera you have. It always comes back to the basics of filming and understanding how exposure works, understanding what your camera's doing. And then, past the basics, you have some things that Blackmagic, like dual native ISO, understanding that intuitively, really understanding it before you go out on a shoot, doing some research. Because even for me, I had to read it multiple times to understand how dual native ISO worked. I thought this was very, very interesting and a great point to make to everyone learning how to use this camera or any camera in general, to always take the time to go through your camera settings, understand what they do, and that's going to help you be a lot more creative out on a shoot because you already know what you need to be set out for any different environment you're at, which when you free your mind up from having to think about how all the settings affect and you just already know it, you free your mind up to be creative in the moment and not have to think about a bunch of settings. So while you need to do that initial hard work of figuring out all those settings, in the end, understanding intuitively will help you out in the long run creatively.
I think some of that has to do with the dual ADC on the, like, I think once I approached it more of thinking just treat the camera like it has 2 ISOs.
Whatever that base ISO, the base ISO is established at here. It's not at 0. The base ISO is not the cleanest ISO. The base ISO is the ISO that you need to be in order to go down or up to get full dynamic range. Would you say
it's based on their dynamic range charts where they decide the amount of stops above and below that is your, your maximum dynamic range.
So I think there's a lot of good things in this at Elements, and you should definitely go and check this out as they get into this discussion further. And it's a lot of stuff we've talked about on this channel as far as shooting with dual native ISO on these cameras and how they work and how they operate and how they're very different from a lot of other cameras with where the dynamic range kind of shifts as you're changing your ISO. And so like they said, it's counterintuitive when you're outside, you get more dynamic range of the highlights at 800 and you have to expose for that and you have to bring in ND filters or other things to compensate for that if you can. You should think about it as like having 2 ISOs, 400 and 3200 ISO, like we've talked about in other videos. But I loved their discussion on this. It's cool to see other filmmakers be real and honest about either botching shots or messing up things that they didn't understand, because it happens to all of us. And I think that's something that especially in YouTube's not talked about enough, is like, we all mess up stuff. We're all creatives. We don't know everything. So there's always going to be things that we mess up in videos and the way we film and all that, no matter how many years we've been filming or how knowledgeable we are about cameras. So let that be an encouragement to all of you who are just getting started, or find yourself in a creative rut and feel like you just can't make anything like anyone else or make it look as good. It's just a process, getting through it and putting yourself out there. And the more you make, the better you'll get. I mean, I can go back and look at some of my old videos on this channel and I can cringe at some of the ways I filmed things or made them. And then just to now to doing it, there's always an improvement. Anyways, check that out. Let me know what you think about, and tell me some stories about you, what your first experience was with the Blackmagic camera. And if you thought when you filmed it and then got back home, like, wow, why did I make the switch over this? This footage looks awful, and trying to go through that process of understanding it. So I definitely have those stories. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below if you've had a similar issue, or if you don't really understand what dual native ISO is and you've had this similar issue but don't know what to do. We have some video resources that we've linked below in the description that have actually already done on this. But yeah, that's it for this video. Until next time, this is John Owens with Frame Voyager.